I exposed my cheating ex to his new girlfriend, and she blocked me. Then the truth came out full story. Okay girls, I need a favor, and I need a real girl's girl for this no judgment PLS. Because I've been sitting on this for weeks now, going back and forth in my head about whether what I did was right or wrong, and honestly, I can't figure it out on my own anymore. So I'm putting it out there. All of it. From the very beginning. Because the full picture matters here, and I need people who actually understand what it's like to love someone who turns out to be completely hollow inside. I want to be upfront about something though. By the time you finish reading this, you might think I went too far. You might think I should have just moved on and let it go. And maybe you're right. But I need you to understand everything that happened before you make that call. Because there's a version of this story where I'm the villain, and there's a version where I'm just a girl who got pushed past her breaking point. I'm genuinely not sure which one is true anymore. His name was Tyler. And for a long time, I thought Tyler was the best thing that had ever walked into my life. We met at a mutual friend's birthday dinner about 2 years ago. I wasn't even supposed to be there. My friend Cassidy had been begging me for weeks to come out, and I kept saying no because I was in the middle of a stressful stretch at work, and I just didn't have the social battery for it. But she guilted me into it at the last second, and I went, and Tyler was sitting across the table from me looking like he had absolutely nowhere else he'd rather be. He was funny, that was the first thing I noticed. Not the kind of funny where a guy is performing for the table and waiting for everyone to laugh. The quiet kind. The kind where he'd lean over and say something low and dry just to me, and I'd have to bite my lip to keep from losing it. We talked the whole dinner, just us. I barely spoke to anyone else, and I didn't even feel bad about it. He asked for my number before we left, and I gave it to him without hesitating, which for me was rare. I'd had a bad experience with someone the year before, and I'd spent most of that year with my walls completely up. But Tyler felt safe. He felt real. That feeling did not last. Looking back now, I can identify the exact moment something shifted. But at the time, I explained it away. I always explained it away. That's the thing about being with someone like Tyler. He was so good at making you feel crazy for noticing things that were completely reasonable to notice. It took me almost a full year to stop trusting my own gut, and by that point I was so deep in it that getting out felt impossible. Things were genuinely good for the first few months, or they seemed that way. He was attentive and sweet and always made time for me. He'd text me good morning without me asking. He remembered small things I mentioned in passing, like the name of my childhood dog or that I hated cilantro, and he'd bring those things up later in ways that made me feel truly seen. I fell for him hard. Harder than I'd fallen for anyone. The first sign came around the 4-month mark, and it was so small that I almost feel embarrassed admitting it shook me. We were lying on his couch watching a movie and his phone kept lighting up. Not ringing, just buzzing and lighting up, over and over. He reached down and flipped it face down without looking at it, and when I asked who was texting him, he said it was just his cousin. Something about his voice when he said it made me pause. It was too smooth, too quick, but I let it go. Because what was I supposed to do? Accuse him of something based on a vibe? I let a lot of things go like that over the next few months. The late replies that turned into no replies. The times he canceled plans last minute with excuses that didn't quite add up. The way he'd go quiet and distant for days, and then come back acting like nothing had happened, warmer than ever, and I'd get so relieved to have him back that I'd forget to be upset. That cycle started earlier than I realized. I was already being conditioned before I understood what conditioning even looked like in a relationship. The first time I actually caught him, we were about 7 months in. I wasn't snooping. I want to be clear about that because I know how it sounds. His phone buzzed on the nightstand while he was in the shower, and the name that came up wasn't one I recognized. It was a girl's name. A contact saved with a little heart next to it. I didn't touch his phone. I just stared at it. And when he came out and saw my face, he knew immediately. He grabbed the phone and said it was an old friend, completely harmless. Just someone he'd known since high school who texted him sometimes. I asked why she had a heart in her contact name. He said he used to date her years ago, and he hadn't thought about changing it. He laughed like it was nothing. And the laugh was so easy and natural that I started to feel like maybe I was being weird about it. Like maybe I was one of those insecure girlfriends who made mountains out of nothing. Except 2 weeks later I found out he'd been texting her every single day. Not old friend catching up texts. Long, intimate texts. The kind you send someone you're trying to keep close. When I confronted him about it, he cried. And I mean cried, not a few tears, full breakdown. He told me he was sorry, that he'd been stupid and selfish, that he wasn't physically cheating but he knew the emotional thing was wrong and he hated himself for it. He promised to cut contact. He said I was the only person who actually mattered to him. He held my face in his hands and looked at me like I was everything. I forgave him, I know. That was my first real mistake, and I own it. Not because forgiving someone is weak, but because I forgave him without making him actually earn it. I just swallowed the pain and moved forward and told myself it was a one-time thing. A blip. Something we could grow past. It wasn't a blip. Over the next several months, I started to lose count of the incidents. There was always an explanation. Always a reason. The girl who kept commenting hearts on his Instagram was apparently someone his roommate used to date, and it was just a friendly thing, no big deal. The weekend he went quiet and barely responded to my messages was because he was stressed about work and needed space to decompress. The time I showed up at his place unannounced and he took weirdly long to answer the door was because he'd been asleep. He was always asleep, or busy, or stressed, or his phone had been on silent. And every single time I pushed back, he'd flip it on me. I was being paranoid, I was being controlling. I was letting my past trauma poison a good thing. He'd actually say that. He'd reference the bad relationship I'd told him about early on, the one that had left me guarded, and he'd weaponize it. He'd say you're doing the thing again, where you self-sabotage because you're scared of something real. And because part of me genuinely feared that he was right, I'd back down. The anxiety started around month 8. I didn't connect it to Tyler at first because I'd dealt with anxiety before and I told myself it was just life stress. But it was specific. It showed up whenever my phone was quiet for too long. Whenever he didn't answer. Whenever I was supposed to see him and something came up. My body knew something my brain was refusing to accept. I was running on cortisol and hope and I was exhausted. By month 10, I was having panic attacks. Not little moments of breathlessness. Full, floor-level panic attacks where I couldn't regulate my breathing, and my hands would go numb, and I'd sit on my bathroom tile at 2 in the morning trying to count my way back to calm. And I still didn't leave. Because he was always so sorry. Because every time I got close to the edge of actually walking away, he'd do something perfect. He'd show up with food when I was having a bad day. He'd plan a whole evening that was exactly what I needed. He'd say things that made me feel, for one bright moment, like everything was going to be okay. That's the thing people don't understand about emotionally manipulative relationships. It's not all bad. If it were all bad, leaving would be easy. It's the good parts that trap you. The good parts make you think you're imagining the bad parts, or that the bad parts are your fault, or that if you just love him better, try harder, be more patient, eventually the good parts will take over completely and stay. They never stay. I finally started reaching out to other girls around month 11, and even that took courage I didn't know I had. I'd noticed a pattern of certain names coming up repeatedly on his social media. Girls who liked everything he posted. Girls he always seemed to have some kind of history with. I started quietly, just sliding into a couple of DMs with vague questions. Asking if they knew Tyler, how they knew him, whether they'd ever had any kind of situation with him. The responses came faster than I expected. The first girl I messaged, whose name was Brooke, replied within an hour. And what she told me cracked something open. She said she'd been talking to Tyler for 3 months and thought they were exclusive. He'd told her he was single. He'd been telling her all the things he told me. Then Brooke introduced me to her friend Marisol, who had her own story. And Marisol knew a girl named Devon, who knew 2 more girls. It snowballed in a way that genuinely made me feel like I was living in a movie. Within 2 weeks there was a group chat with over 10 of us. 10 girls. Different ages, different situations, different timelines, some overlapping with mine. Some going back even further than our relationship. One girl said she'd been sending him money for months, because he'd told her he was going through a hard time financially, and she'd wanted to help. Another said he'd asked for explicit photos, and then used them to pressure her into staying in contact with him. I want you to sit with that for a second. 10 girls, 1 man, a whole coordinated web of manipulation that he'd been maintaining simultaneously, in some cases for years. I was devastated and I was furious, but more than anything I was tired. So deeply tired of feeling insane in a situation where I'd actually been completely correct this whole time. My gut had known, my body had known. Every panic attack, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt that I'd been talked out of feeling, all of it had been justified. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't self-sabotaging. I was in a relationship with someone who was actively deceiving me, and at least 9 other women at the same time. We ended things in January. Or I ended things. Tyler did not accept it gracefully. He called and texted for days afterward. Long messages full of apologies and explanations and promises that this time would be different. He cried on the phone. He showed up to places he knew I'd be. He kept finding new angles, new ways to try to hold on to whatever access he still had to me. And the worst part is that even knowing everything I knew, there were moments when I almost softened. That's what that kind of relationship does to you. It rewires you so that even the person hurting you feels like comfort. But I held the line. I kept my distance. I focused on my own healing. And then, maybe 2 weeks after we officially ended things, one of the girls from the group chat sent me a screenshot. It was Tyler's Instagram. He had a new post, and in it was a girl I'd never seen before, but it wasn't just the photo that hit me. It was the date the account had started following him. January 1st. The first day of the new year. The same day we ended things, give or take a few days either way. The caption of the post was casual, but the comments were all hearts, and the girl had commented something that made it clear she wasn't just some friend. I did some digging, because at this point I had no shame about it. Her name was Ashley. They were clearly together. And it took me about 20 minutes of cross-referencing timelines and screenshots from the group chat to realize something that made my stomach turn completely over. He hadn't waited until we broke up to pursue Ashley. The timeline didn't add up that way. He'd been talking to her before we ended things. Maybe weeks before, maybe longer. He'd walked out of our relationship and directly into one he'd already been building, while still texting me, while still calling me, while still feeding me enough hope to keep me from fully closing the door. He had a whole girlfriend, and he was still blowing up my phone trying to keep me on a string. I sat with that for a long time before I decided to do anything. Because part of me said, you're out, you're healing, just let it go. But another part of me kept thinking about Ashley. About what she didn't know. About how she was probably feeling exactly how I'd felt in those early months, safe and seen and like she'd found something real. She didn't know about Brooke. She didn't know about Marisol or Devon or the other 7 girls in the chat. She didn't know that the man she was with had been emotionally and financially exploiting women for years. She didn't know that I still had screenshots of him, texting me lovingly 2 weeks into their relationship. I decided to tell her. I thought about it for a few days first. I went back and forth. I made the case to myself for staying quiet, protecting my own peace, not inviting more drama. But I kept coming back to the same thing. If I were Ashley, I would want to know. If any of the girls in the group chat had known about me earlier, I would have wanted them to say something. That silence, that collective looking away, had allowed Tyler to keep doing what he was doing for years unchecked. So I messaged her. I kept it calm. I didn't go in heated or accusatory. I introduced myself, told her I'd been with Tyler and that I needed to share some things I thought she deserved to know. I attached a handful of screenshots, not everything, just enough to make the pattern undeniable. The texts he'd sent me after January 1st while they were together. A few messages from the group chat that showed the bigger picture. She responded within the day. And she believed me. Or at least, she believed me enough to leave him. She sent me a message saying she was devastated, that she'd had no idea, that she was grateful I reached out. She said she'd confronted him and he'd come clean about some of it, and she was ending things. I felt like I'd done the right thing. I genuinely did. That lasted about a week. Because then Ashley's best friend, a girl named Courtney, found my Instagram and came at me with both barrels. According to Courtney, I was a bitter, obsessed ex who couldn't accept that Tyler had moved on. She said I'd cherry-picked screenshots out of context to manipulate Ashley because I wanted Tyler back. She said what I'd done was harassment, that I'd inserted myself into a new relationship out of jealousy, and that Ashley was a mess because of me. I tried to respond calmly. I told Courtney that I had no interest in Tyler, that I'd reached out to warn Ashley not to win him back, and that if she wanted to see the full chain of screenshots rather than a few pulled clips, I was happy to share them. Courtney told me I was unhinged and blocked me. I found out through someone in the group chat that Tyler had gotten to Ashley, that he'd gone back to her and fed her some version of events where I was the unstable ex who'd been obsessively trying to break them up. He'd apparently admitted to some of the texts between us but framed them as me pursuing him, not the other way around. He said he'd been too kind and hadn't known how to cut me off cleanly. Classic. Exactly what he'd have said. Ashley blocked me. And that one actually stung more than I expected. Not because of Tyler. I was long past anything to do with Tyler, but because I'd reached out woman to woman, offered her the truth with receipts, and she'd chosen to believe the person who'd been manipulating her. I understood it, I really did, because I'd done the same thing for almost a year, but understanding it didn't make it hurt less. The group chat was furious on my behalf. Several of the girls wanted to mass contact Ashley themselves, send her everything collectively, make it impossible for her to dismiss. And that's where things started to get complicated. Because that was the moment someone suggested what eventually happened, not just a message to Ashley, a public post, a call-out, something that would strip Tyler of the ability to keep doing this by removing his ability to hide, something that the next Ashley and the one after that could find with a simple search. I sat on that idea for almost 2 weeks. Here's what I kept wrestling with. On one hand, Tyler had genuinely caused serious harm to multiple women. He hadn't just cheated. He'd manipulated, emotionally abused, and in some cases financially exploited people who trusted him. The anxiety and panic attacks I'd dealt with were real. The girl who'd sent him money and felt too ashamed to tell anyone was real. The damage he'd done was documented across more than 10 different accounts from women who'd never even met each other. If that isn't a pattern deserving of exposure, I don't know what is. On the other hand, I knew what going public would look like. I knew it could come across as scorned ex-drama. I knew Tyler would immediately frame it that way. I knew there would be people who looked at a group of women speaking out and saw obsession instead of truth. I knew it might follow him in ways that felt disproportionate years down the line. And I knew it would cost me something too. My peace. My healing. My ability to just move on. But I kept thinking about Ashley walking around thinking she was back in a safe relationship. I kept thinking about whatever girl came after Ashley. And the one after that. So I posted. I didn't use his last name. I didn't post anything explicit or designed to humiliate. I posted a calm, detailed thread. I laid out the timeline clearly. I described the pattern of behavior, the manipulation tactics, the financial exploitation, the emotional abuse cycle. I included some of the screenshots that were already in the group chat, ones that had already been shared among multiple women and were clearly documented evidence of a pattern. I made it clear that this was about warning others, not revenge. It got shared, more than I expected. Some of Tyler's mutual followers started commenting that they'd heard similar things or that they weren't surprised. A few people tagged it and added their own stories. Someone who'd known Tyler in college messaged me directly saying he'd done something similar to a girl in their friend group years ago, and she'd been too scared to say anything at the time. Tyler texted me within 6 hours of the post going up. Not crying this time. Angry, he called it defamation. He said he was going to get a lawyer. He said I was obsessed and vindictive, and that I'd regret it. He sent several variations of that message over the next day or two, each one a little more frantic than the last. I didn't respond to any of them. Cassidy, the friend who'd originally invited me to the dinner where I met Tyler, called me the morning after the post to say she supported me fully, but was a little worried I'd poked a bear, and that I should be prepared for blowback. She wasn't wrong. Some people in our wider social circle came at me. A few mutual friends of Tyler's posted vague things clearly aimed at me about women who can't let go. One guy I'd never even spoken to directly messaged me to call me dramatic. But the messages from women I didn't know were different. I got DMs from girls saying they'd been in situations exactly like mine, with different men, and seeing someone speak up had made them feel less alone. A few said they wished someone had warned them before they got in too deep. One girl said she was currently in something similar, and my post had been the push she needed to take a closer look at her situation. That part I didn't regret. I still don't regret that part. The part I keep coming back to is Ashley. Because 2 weeks after the post went up, a mutual acquaintance told me Ashley had left Tyler again. For real this time, apparently. She'd seen the post, seen other people corroborating it, and couldn't explain it away anymore. She didn't reach out to me. I didn't expect her to, but she was out. And then Courtney found me again. Not to thank me, not to apologize for the things she'd said, but to tell me that Ashley was falling apart and that it was my fault for handling things the way I did. She said if I'd really cared about Ashley as a woman, I would have given her space to figure things out on her own instead of dragging everything into public. She said the post had made Ashley the subject of social media gossip, and that people were now whispering about her judgment, not just about Tyler. I thought about that for a long time. Because Courtney wasn't entirely wrong. I hadn't thought about what going public might mean for the women involved in the story, not just Tyler. Ashley hadn't asked to be part of a viral post. Her relationship, her pain, her moment of being deceived had become internet content whether she wanted it to or not. And even if I'd protected her specific identity in my post, people in her circle knew who the current girlfriend was. That visibility had a cost. But here's what I keep landing on, and I genuinely don't know if it's the right conclusion, or just the conclusion I need to believe. Tyler created this situation. Tyler chose to do what he did, over and over to woman after woman for years. Every piece of fallout, every relationship damaged, every woman left sorting through the wreckage of what he'd built and then burned, that's all his. I didn't give any of these women trauma. I exposed the person who did. And I did it because the private, gentle, woman-to-woman approach had already been tried, and Tyler had neutralized it before Ashley could even fully process it. I'd spent a year letting a man convince me that my feelings weren't real. I'd had panic attacks on my bathroom floor. I'd watched him do it to other women while I was in the group chat reading through their stories and recognizing every single tactic because I'd lived through them too. I tried the quiet route and been blocked for it. At some point, quiet stops being dignified and starts being complicit. At least, that's what I tell myself. But I'm still not entirely sure. Because there's a version of events where I was so angry, so hurt, and so desperate for something to matter that I convinced myself I was doing something noble when really I was just finally letting myself be loud about the pain I'd swallowed for 12 months. There's a version where I genuinely believed I was protecting future girls, and a version where I was also, somewhere underneath that, making sure Tyler felt some consequence for once in his life. And I don't know how to separate those two things cleanly. Maybe they were both true at the same time. What I know for certain is this. He abused me, he abused other women. He kept doing it because he'd been allowed to, and I'm not sorry that I said something. I'm not sorry that I reached out to Ashley or that I shared what I knew. I'm not sorry that other women felt seen by what I posted or that Ashley eventually got out. What I'm less sure about is the method, the public part, whether that was justice or just the loudest version of grief I could find, whether I helped more people than I hurt, whether I would make the same call again knowing how it all landed. Tyler never did get a lawyer for what it's worth. The threats stopped after about a week. He's kept a low profile since then. I don't know if he's learned anything and I'm not holding my breath. My anxiety is better. I've been working through things with a therapist, and I feel more like myself than I have in over a year. I don't miss Tyler. I'm not sure I ever really missed him so much as I miss the version of him that I believed existed before I knew better. But I do think about Ashley sometimes. I hope she's okay. I hope the way it all came out didn't define her experience of it in a way that made things harder than they needed to be. I hope she's somewhere doing fine. And I think about the other girls in the group chat, about Brooke and Marisol and Devin and all the others. We still talk sometimes. We've all moved on in different ways and at different paces. But we went through something together that none of us will forget. I don't know if I was a girl's girl or a messy one. I genuinely don't. So I guess I'm asking you, given everything, the year of manipulation and abuse, the group chat, Ashley being warned privately and then manipulated into blocking me, the public post, the fallout, the fact that she eventually did leave and is apparently struggling, the fact that Courtney blames me and some people in my circle thought I went too far and other women I've never met said it helped them. Was I justified? Was going public the right call? Or should I have protected my peace and walked away from all of it the second he stopped being my problem?